Welcome to Command Control Power, the longest-running Apple consulting podcast. For over a decade, we've delivered weekly episodes filled with epic tech support stories, troubleshooting insights, discussions about managing clients and businesses, and interviews with industry colleagues and vendors, all tailored for our pro listeners. We also offer exclusive content through Patreon. This private podcast feed is designed specifically for IT professionals, providing valuable advice and guidance on tackling the more complex aspects of running your practice, working with clients and employees, and managing device fleets. With a modest monthly contribution, you'll gain access to a wealth of advanced Apple expertise, meaningful connections, and a community driven by a shared passion for Apple technology. Visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support to learn more.
Before we get started, a quick note. Today's guest, Michael Thomsen, is also one of this year's speakers at the ACES conference. If you're in the Apple consulting or MSP space, ACES is one of the few events focused entirely on the business side of what we do: pricing, operations, and long-term growth. The conference takes place May 12th and 13th in Minneapolis. You can learn more at acesconf.com.
Welcome back to Command Control Power. Many-time returning guest, Michael Thomsen of Origin 84, all the way from Sydney, Australia, if I remember correctly. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Great to have you back. Great to see you. And looking forward to seeing you soon at the ACES conference. I assume you're making the trek once more.
It's almost like an annual, back-to-back. I do the podcast, I come to America and see all my friends. And
right on.
Yeah, so look, it's nice to be able to have a bit of an annual tradition now.
Okay.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
Looking forward to getting to Minneapolis.
How many hours
right
in the
on.
air does that represent for you, roughly speaking, one way?
The trip, it's 27 hours to get from where we are to there. So yeah, it's
That's
a little
insane.
bit of one, but you get used to it. I actually quite enjoy it. I don't buy the Wi-Fi pass, so I'm offline properly for that period. So it is really quite nice. So yeah, it's as much as it's a chore, it's actually part of my ritual. It's like self-care as well. Like, take a break. You can't be doing things at home when you're really that far away, time zone wise and whatever else. So I actually really enjoy it. So it's a bit of a privilege, and I call it work.
I remember you've mentioned in the past about that fact of setting up the company to be without you. I think you have a pretty good setup in general, if I remember correctly. It sounds like you're not putting out fires every hour of every day, but I imagine there's some prep work to get ready to just leave that behind, knowing that, like you said, with the time difference, it'd be really hard to coordinate being able to assist. So can you say more about this, that not only the logistical preparation, but also the mental preparation of leaving the company behind for that period of time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the journey from being a solopreneur to being a person that leads a team is one that it's unique for everyone that gives it a go. I think if you've got a background traditionally working for a larger organization where you've had leadership and management roles, I think that there is more of a tension than if you're just starting out and you've never really had that leadership in the past, because you understand what better practices look like and you know how much the lift will actually be. And sometimes you get stuck with perfect being unachievable and not being willing to just go good is enough and give yourself the space, and you give your team the opportunity to just get it done and while you're away. In terms of the mental preparation, the first time I went away for a long period of time was back in 2017. And we had a team that at that stage was 3 employees. And I probably spent, like most people, 50% of the time I was away with my wife worried about what was going to happen. And the lesson really that nothing's going to really go wrong. If you've got the practices and the processes and the documentation and things like that happening, really, you have to be unlucky on a day-to-day basis for there to be a fire. But when we did have an issue while I was away, I realized it was actually our fault. We had actually not done our processes the way that we said that we would do them, and we created a trap for our own team. So that was the point where I'm like, we can't have ourselves walk into this mess again. I don't know much about the Australian military, but we had a situation when we went to the First World War and we went to a place called Gallipoli. And effectively, Gallipoli is a beach and a really steep hill. And we were sent by the British to that place to put our soldiers onto the front line. And unfortunately, as you can imagine, when you've got people who are defending position from a high elevation, we got massacred as a military. And I take a lot from that, which is there is a little bit of military planning that you have to put into this. You have to make sure that there's chain of command. You have to make sure that there's a decision maker for every single thing that you do yourself and step out. And I think there's a business maturity conversation that has to be had across a lot of businesses as we move into more of a compliance-driven environment because of all of the things that we have to deal with now, such as HIPAA compliance and cybersecurity insurance and so forth. But really documenting those roles and documenting those tasks and then having a person responsible and then the secondarily responsible person when the first person is disabled is actually what makes me relax when I leave.
Yeah.
In short, it really comes into organizational design. On the other side of it, it comes down to you have to know how much is enough and how much is just unachievable for the size of the organization that you are.
Wow.
Do you have a run book for the company, or is it something that's physically printed out, or is it something like Basecamp? What do you use to cull all the information together?
Yeah, so a lot of the information, we actually use Confluence at the moment, just as a place to put all of that knowledge. We found it to be a little bit limiting because of the way that the rest of our stack works. So we're actually looking to move that. But a lot of the organizational decision-making comes through using the EOS methodology. Not that we're heavy users of all of the components of it, but certainly when it comes to accountability, that's the thing that is the most important. If we've obviously had people talk about EOS before on the show, and I think it's actually a really good sort of potpourri of business advice and methodologies that you can use, and you can pick and choose some of them. But what we've chosen to do with it is take the accountability component and then create these documents they're effectively success criteria for every role that we have. And what's fascinating when you go through that and you stretch all of the roles out and you go, what do I actually do? And what does that role need to succeed? Is you end up in a situation where you say, okay, these two things that I do are not actually compatible if I was to give this to somebody else. And so there's this tension in the business as how we pull it apart and put it back together and redistribute responsibilities to just make it a little bit more aligned with what people do in other areas of their job, but also their personality fit, which is important as well. So yeah, we've changed the organization a little bit. And since I spoke to you last, we've grown slightly. We're a team of 8 people. We use 4 fractional staff to augment as well. So we're quite a few of us now. And so if we don't do this, we end up with people doing the same thing and tripping over each other.
Sure.
Or we assume that somebody else is looking after it and no one is doing it. And that can be from the simplest follow-up from a ticket all the way through to the other day, our team had 2 pay slips from 2 different systems from 2 different people. And I'm like, they were the same numbers, which is fantastic, but it's not necessary. But it just shows how the HR team and finance team are not actually on the same page about what triggers what. And that's a work in progress. So it's just a good example. There's always something to work on.
It sounds like Apple during those Gil Amelio years where different departments were working on parallel projects and neither one knew the other one was working on it. Yeah.
Some of which may have been by design. Yeah, it's something you just said, Michael, it just reminded me of the earlier thing you mentioned, aiming for perfection, but trusting you're never going to get there. That's not possible in life to achieve perfection. And the phrase, perfect is the enemy of good. And the Steve Jobs quote comes to mind, real artists ship, right? It's like the thing is done, now we need to ship it. You have to get it to done, though. And if you're aiming for actual perfection, you'll never get it there. This is a topic that has come up recently for me, and thinking back to my early days, my first, maybe let's say up to a decade in business, maybe more so, let's say the first 5 years. I thought I could achieve perfection. I thought just naively, every single interaction with a client, there's always room to be even more thorough, put even more care, be even more careful in general. And it occurs to me over time, you learn that's a maturity thing in business, realizing that you'll never achieve perfection in any given interaction or overall. That's just life. But where do you draw that line? Do you still aim for perfection? Do you aim for 95%? How do you know what's practical and what's possible versus keeping your standards high?
I think that this is about working out the what you know and what you don't know, and what the client knows and what the client doesn't know. I think that there's this measure of expertise when you go into this conversation about perfectionism that really does. You have to look at it from a liberal arts perspective, right? There is no perfect literature, there's no perfect art. And what we're doing when we're doing business, we're doing an art form, right? It's not actually scientifically based. It's a lot of emotional, like a lot of things that we can't control. So there is an art to actually running a business. The scientific part, obviously, is that there is a right answer when it comes to technology most of the time. Maybe there's a couple, but there's not more than three. So you can pick and choose how you do it. But when you know more, you want to make that bit thorough. So I think that what the challenge I see, particularly with people who I employ who come from the solo consulting space, is that they like the technology. They like to get the technology clean and in line. But then they try and go, that's how I want to manage my client base. And if you've got that sort of structure and how you're looking at that, and you're trying to run a perfect process across your imperfect client stakeholders, you're in for a world of hurt, because the frustration that you will face when they don't understand, because you don't really measure the right level of engagement or care, they just want it done and you want it to be like procedurally accurate. It's very hard to get the happiness that you want out of that. There's no satisfaction there. And at the end of the day, my measure of satisfaction is the invoice being paid. And that's
Nice.
that is the true measure of success, right? Even if you've got a client that's saying to your face that they're really happy with the interaction, there's been more than enough examples over 10 years where you have been blindsided by a client going, yeah, thanks, we're done, and I haven't been that happy. But they've been paying up until that point, and then all of a sudden they just out of the blue say that they're not happy, and they give you all these reasons why. And I think it's very important to look at how you're managing your accounts at that point with the idea of perfectionism, to then go from there. So what's the level do I need to operate at that in that area? And then go, can someone repeat it? And then that's really the benchmark. So if you don't have a team that can repeat what you do, then don't raise the standard higher than that, because they can't deliver on your behalf.
Yeah, that's really good insight. Having the team, you don't want to cater to the lowest common denominator. In that case, maybe you need to call some team members if you have to lower your standards too much. Being a solo entrepreneur at that time, it was all inside my head. It was all just me executing every step of the process. And I could just hold myself to whatever standard. And in some cases, it's if you put another hour or 2 or 3 into it, you eke out another 1% satisfaction or toward the perfection. You can make that decision internally if that's worth it, and with the client in the loop. But as you add more team members, you do have to have a policy that dictates what's good enough. For me, the good enough is if there's no risk of data loss, if there's a little bit of follow-up, I can deal with that later. If there's, I overlooked one small thing, it's fine to hear from a client. If it means that I didn't have to spend 2 hours to get to perfection and I can spend 15 minutes later with no downside, really, as long as the client doesn't lose satisfaction, it seems there's a balance there. It's just something I've been playing with recently, so it's interesting to kick it around a bit.
Yeah, I just challenge you to look at describing what it is that you're worried about. And so to understand what it is that drives you in that way, because it doesn't matter what you do. If you don't understand why you're doing it, you're going to be always searching for that like end state when it comes to data loss, right? And that's one thing that I can't say that we won't ever have it happen, but I certainly haven't had it happen. And that's because I would lose sleep if I didn't have all those things taken care of. My North Star, and I teach this to the team, I don't like saying sorry. That's everyone that bumps into me will probably find that I don't apologize. I will skirt around the apology, and I won't say that but I certainly won't say sorry. So I don't want my team to walk me into a situation where I have to apologize. And when I've worked for other companies and I've been the representative and they've made a mistake and it's been clearly just a negligence or process hasn't been followed and I've had to apologize, I've hated it, because it's just like your word. I think it's like your integrity is the thing that you're trying to protect. And if you don't want to say sorry and you don't want the spotlight to be put on you potentially for something negative, then that is, if that's driving it, perfect. Work out how to avoid putting yourself in the headlights there.
That makes sense. Yeah. Really interesting. I guess it's a good pivot to the topic at hand, which is the concept of standards, policies, and certification. You listed the alphabet soup of several of these big ones. SOC 2, we've all heard that buzzword. HIPAA, very common. Also, ISO 27001. So that's, I think, less spoken about. Maybe it's just a little bit more of a tongue twister for people. But do you want to lay out why these are top of mind to you? You even mentioned compliance earlier in the conversation. And certainly this is, maybe you could look at it as a metric for perfection. If you can meet these standards, you can ensure that you're following best practices in regards to security and compliance. Could I put you on the spot, Michael, to lay out how you think of SOC 2, HIPAA, and ISO 27001?
Yeah, look, the reason why I wanted to talk about this with you is that it is something that is really important today to understand the frameworks that are being solidified out there in the industries that your clients are in. A lot of those clients are slightly unaware that there are needs to be elevated when it comes to frameworks that they're following. But I feel that even the smaller businesses now that we're supporting are bumping into responses for tenders for their clients or questions asked downstream as they are now vendor partners. And not only are they, like our clients, needing to think about this, these bigger organizations now, it's about risk management. And risk is everywhere right now. So what they're looking for is a way to validate whether you are doing any work to make your processes and systems more robust. And so we've just seen a rise over the last 5 years. And I think the ISO 27001, so ISO standards and IEC standards, you're probably familiar with them. They come in all shapes and sizes and they affect you, such as the quality of the petrol that you buy at the Bowser, the weights and measures standards, quality system standards. You'll see those things all over once you start looking for it. But the differences between SOC 2, HIPAA, and ISO 27001 is those three really comes down to the specificity of what it is it's referring to and the granular level of control that it specifies. Because we have a situation where what we're looking for in our jobs is reassurance that we're doing the right thing. And our businesses, I think, would probably be driven by 90% procedure and maybe 10% policy. And that's because a lot of people don't know how to elevate from a process to a policy. Now, a policy isn't something that should be seen as this big and scary thing. If you call it governance, risk, and compliance, it sounds a little bit more heavy. But a policy really is this is just how we do it. I'm sure that I don't know the local chains in the US, but we have a hardware store here that say that they have the lowest prices guaranteed, and that's a policy. And so their policy is really clear that they will be the cheapest. And that means that the procedural decision on how they execute being cheapest, that will change over time. But I think that when we get to this policy, that's the thing that we anchor off. And I think when we've got businesses that are growing, what we find without a policy to make a decision against, then people can't actually do their jobs freely. They have to ask for approval because they want to get a sign off to make sure it's okay. But if you've got a policy, you can go, meets policy, great, do it. If it doesn't meet policy, you have to either do an exception or you have to comply. And someone has to make that decision. So that's just an overview of how policy and procedure kind of works in our view. When it comes to the certifications themselves, I think that this is the new way that I think that we get sticky with clients. So in the past, it used to be getting sticky by having all of your services and all of the hardware and all of the management and all those things in the businesses that we're supporting, because it made it difficult for people to leave. Always hated it, but that's really, there's a truth to it in terms of there is a lift and shift when you have to go and work with somebody else. But certainly, the better those tools were working, the more the client was going to be likely to stay. Now that's gone. And actually, Apple were leading this for a very long time, where they're saying ABM, lives with the actual client. You can't do that for them, Mr. Consultant. So with that, if we look at that lens and we apply that to everything that we're doing, it's transactional from email, domain management, RMM, MDM. Like it's you can go anywhere, and realistic clients will be potentially buying these things with their own credit cards. And so you don't have that buy-in that you used to have. And moving to a services focused and services first business model made me think about, okay, if I'm providing services and those services are simply just help desk, and then there's some projects, that's not sticky. So the thing that we really needed to look at is how do we own a better part of that relationship with the client? And what we did is we structured our offering to make, it's not tiered, I don't think it's the right way to say it, but our business model is we just take an annual contract fee for services, and then we do whatever it takes. And that's just for a fixed price. Now, it doesn't necessarily have a specific dollar value per person or per location or per device, but there's a formula that we use to get that price reasonably accurate. I hit a ceiling. I couldn't raise my rates, and because I didn't have a leverage with saying it's this many dollars per person to get that dollar rate higher and higher, I couldn't anchor it in that, which is a problem. But on the same side, we make a lot more money because we don't talk about that specifically in our agreements. We just say there's 50 people, we include those people, 2 offices, we include those as well. And if we go over a certain number of hours, we'll have a chat. But when it gets to the value, and I don't have a diagram here to show you, we actually have a magic quadrant, which you're probably aware. Bottom left, transactional, top right is strategic. You'll see that the MDM providers are pretty good at finding a Gartner magic quadrant to show that they're up in the top. So you're looking for the top is it's trusted, it's strong, it's successful, it's really where you want to be.
Yeah.
Now, we break down our businesses into 4 components, and we look at IT help desk. So if you're really good at IT help desk, that's great, but you managed to get the lowest bottom left quadrant of service delivery done well. And that's great. It's really important to do that. But if you're spending more time in that quadrant, you're not transforming or helping that business strategically. And then the next...
And you're replaceable. It's a lot easier to replace someone in that lower left quadrant than in the upper right.
Correct. And then we move along and go, okay, so the next step in the process is to go, what do you think is the next step? And so what we've done is that we see that IT administration is the actual, so the next step, so if we separate those 2 things out, that they're 2 different disciplines, we probably blend them very closely, but the client needs to know that we're doing support and we're responding to the ticket, but then we made a change and it's an administrative change. So we split those 2 things out. They're on the bottom. So that means that we can be replaced for those 2 as well. Sure. And so to get your business elevated, we've looked at this and gone, okay, what are the things that can't be necessarily replicated? Or if they are, they're done in a different way, and you get to pick the sort of the flavor or the vibe. And so top left of the quadrant, we've put in account management. And so account management is really driving the relationship there to make sure that the client is understood. And that account manager actually has got tension with our team because they represent the client as much as they represent the business. And so you get this bridge between the 2, which is really strong. And it's a little bit antagonistic sometimes because the devil's advocate in the account manager is the account manager wants the client to stay. And if we're doing a crappy job, he's actually going to antagonize the team to go, hey, do better. So even a lot of our colleagues have that as well. If we just take all of those table stakes in today's market, the thing that we've now added in is the top right, which is strategy. And strategy forms a lot of different components, fractional for the most part, but the common terms that we hear in this industry are CIO, CTO, CISO, all these kinds of misunderstood acronyms. And where we've landed is saying that top right corner of the quadrant is where we want to be spending most of the effort in terms of time internally to make sure that the client has less tickets. And what we've actually managed to do is successfully get a situation where by putting more time and effort into strategic, into policy, into governance, into understanding business operations, we can see a ticket come in and test that quickly against why Is it a business operations problem in that business? Is it a systems operational problem that we need to take care of? And then quickly do a root cause analysis. And if it's something that we can fix, we're going to fix it. And we're going to fix it at the heart of the issue. And that's where I think people who haven't got the resourcing or the margin inside their teams to do that bit of analysis, they're just ticket flicking. And they're not going to actually get traction to make that structural improvement for the support that they're delivering. But the benefit we find is that once we've found that problem, we don't just fix it for that client. We make that an issue, and that issue needs to be fixed for all of the clients programmatically. Because if it's happened once for one client, it's likely to happen to another client at some point. And particularly in the space of Microsoft token theft or conditional access or whatever it is, it's a moving feast. But it's not just a problem for that client. It's a problem for any client that's got that same solution. So I think I'm probably rambling a little bit, but I hope I'm taking you on the journey to go. We're getting to the top quadrant where we're talking about strategy. And then if you want that, now I have a new offer. Right. So what I'm saying is everybody else in the market can do help desk. Everybody else in the market can do IT admin. Some of them will do account management, but nobody is going to provide you that anchor in strategy.
Interesting.
And so that's where we uplift. And some clients, and this goes back to what we were talking about, perfect. Not all clients will actually need it, and not all clients will actually pay for it. And if I'm saying all my clients need to have that because I'm trying to line them perfectly up, I'm in for, again, a lot of hurt because they're not going to necessarily get there. But what we don't do is we don't exclude the strategy from the clients that don't pay for it. What we do is we just do it in a lighter touch because it helps the support desk not do too many tickets because we need to make it more robust. We just don't reveal the recipe. So we don't reveal the policies that we're internally referencing to make those decisions, which a lot of our other clients actually have, which have been formed from the frameworks. So it's like this circular, ongoing, continual improvement methodology that is certification forces you to review what you do. It forces you to assess whether you're meeting a standard or whether you've got gaps or whether you've got risks, and making sure that you have an ongoing method of resolving those.
Yeah. A lot to unpack, and that gives a really good overview of the strategy of how you handle your service offering and your motivation for doing it. It occurs to me that ticket relay aspect is something that's not disincentivized when the company is a break-fix model billing hourly. As a wise man once said in the very early days of this show, Jerry will remember, Luis Geraldo said that hourly billing is the scum of the earth, was his quote. And of course, we all took that to heart, and over time transformed our business models to include a lot more managed services and monthly retainers, this sort of thing. But even still today, my business is based on an hourly billing model. So we have clients that prepay for a certain amount of time, and then we use that time as needed for the work that needs to happen, aside from the monthly retainer and monthly services. If you get a ticket about an issue and you solve it, maybe that's 15 minutes, quote unquote, billable, or that draws from the time that they've paid. If you get another of the same ticket, hey, cool, another 15 minutes billable, no harm there. Whereas with your model, you have a flat rate that you're charging. And so your incentive is to minimize the number of recurring tickets. If you see a pattern emerge where you're seeing the same types of issues coming up, whether at one client or across the board, you have a real incentive to, like you said, address kind of the root cause of that and maybe build a new policy around it if it's something that's occurring because it's not yet part of the policy. So it's strategic not only for your clients, but also for your business. And so you're in that level of alignment with your clients. But I guess to your point, they have to be willing to buy into that to some degree, even the ones that aren't necessarily like deciding to pay more for that level of strategy. They're getting that because that's just the way you do business. So can you suss that out a little bit more about how you still provide that value because it's just the way you do things, but you're maybe not giving them the full value because they haven't actually signed on to this IT strategy?
The anecdote I have is the only reason that I'm feeling confident to talk about this is that there's a moment in time where you go, as a guy, you go from being a young guy who won't listen to an old guy that's learnt enough to go, I'll listen. So I'm just going to caveat all of this where you have to go through a lot of these things yourself to be able to understand when the moment is that you push and when the moment is that you don't. So you don't know what you don't know. I say that a lot, but it really isn't something that reveals itself until a certain point in time. But I'd say in last year, probably around ACES, I actually feel like I became an old guy. And I now listen a lot more. And
That's what 27 hours in flight will do to you over time, I feel.
Yeah, send you crazy. It's the contrails. But the thing for me is listening is super, super important here. And at the heart of that, we've got to understand what we feel. We've got to understand what the clients are feeling. I've got an example for you. So I actually have a client specifically I wasn't listening to. And I was pushing this agenda and I was trying to get them to comply and I was trying to really make it right for them. And the client's 25 people. They are a publicity company. So you probably understand the color and the shape of that. A lot of younger influencer type people, some older people who are trying to work out how to hang on before they become a dinosaur. So you've got a big scope of people there. So technically not that literate, don't need a lot of necessarily day-to-day IT help when it comes to the fact that they're using like social media and they're just using basic applications. They went through the process recently of moving from an office that we serviced to a shared office. And we hadn't removed their rates for a couple of years. We said, look, you've moved to the office. We haven't moved our rates. We'll keep the rate the same. And then you can just we'll continue as you are and we won't lift the rate. So at that point, I was like, okay, cool. I think I've done a really good job of doing that. Right. And then they're like, the rate's too high. And I'm like, we're doing all these things for you. And I started my spiel on strategy and about certification and about compliance. And I realized very quickly that I was getting glazed looks. And they don't care. Simply, they do not care. And I was like, great, this is a problem because now I'm going to have a conversation on price because they're anchoring the fact that the office is gone and they've moved to a co-working space and that provides technology that they want to discount. So what I did at that point in time was try and do exactly what you say, which is how do we undo this to provide the client an experience that is the same but is cheaper. Now, ultimately, they've gone to market, and that's been the best thing that I've had because now they don't want to leave because they're happy with what we do. So they like what we do, but the price is the sticking point. So we're seeing all these proposals come in, and we're seeing what people are saying that they're doing, and effectively they've shopped our contract to other people, and they've just put it through ChatGPT. And what's really fascinating is that it's highlighting how what we say we do is uncommon language in these businesses' proposals because it just feels really janky. What we learned from that process is we just have to have our standards and we have to work out how we talk about them because our team can't actually do less. So we can't do less security just because you're not paying enough. We can't do less security because you're not engaging in policy conversations. So effectively what we've had to do is go through that process of saying, okay, the value that you get is based on how much budget you've got and how much you understand the value rises with the complexity of the business that you are. So if we look at this from a service delivery, we want to do the same thing for all clients where possible. It just makes sense, right? It's the same network stack. It's the same MDM. It's the same patch schedule. It's the same whatever. We want to do that. Now, if I say to you that we look at a certification that says that you have to have critical patches put in within 48 hours of them being released, my argument is, why don't we just put all patches out with 48 hours? Because if you think about it, the effort to actually go through the process of working out which is critical, you're going to stage it, then the cycle of interrupting the client, if you delay a patch that you could do at 48 hours for 14 days, and there's another patch that's for something else that happens to be 24 hours within that 14 day, at the end point for 14 days enforcement, it's critical. You'll have two questions being asked about restarts or quit the application anyway. So we've just said our policy is that we just ask you to restart your computer every 2 weeks. That gives us our window of operating system restart hygiene, which then puts the updates in place and applications third party 48 hours. And that meets the highest level of governance. Now, if I'm talking to a customer who needs to do certification for ISO 27001 and we write a policy, we can say that we meet the strictest and most stringent standards for, what NIST or SOC 2 or whatever is asking for. But the client that doesn't, they're just getting patched anyway. And if they say, hey, all of a sudden, we've got to do a certification and an audit because we need to have this thing, or a client's asking a question, what is it that we have? We can say, you meet the highest standard. We just need to write you a policy so you can put that in front of the person asking the question. And that's where we get the conversation to go into that top quadrant, to get the traction, and then we can say, hey, hold on, this costs money.
Interesting. That aspect of it reminds me of a recent conversation I was listening to on the Accidental Tech podcast, where they talked about, in regards to this rumor that Apple may offer a version of the MacBook Neo where they have a better processor physically installed, but to have access to it, they might have you pay later, essentially. I don't know if this is something that Apple may actually do, or this was just a speculation from some commentator, but they had a whole conversation about how car companies have done this. You've got the heated seats, they're installed, the hardware's there, but if you want the button to work when you press heated seats, you've got to pay a subscription. I think BMW did that at one point. And so the idea is like your standards and practices are already in place. They're already meeting these government standards in various forms. And the client is already getting the benefit, whether they've essentially paid for it or not. But if they want the piece of paper that says we qualify, now our insurance, we get a better insurance policy, or we can work with our clients that require this, or whatever the case is, that's the value that they're getting when that time comes. So for you to provide that piece of paper, so to speak, that's when they have to actually pay up. Meanwhile, they've actually been getting most of the benefit most of the time, it sounds like.
Is there anything that you leave out, though? Like, I understand what you're saying on the security side and that you don't want them to be less secure. It makes total sense. Is there anything that you can feel that you leave out of the puzzle so that you don't hit the cost, take a hit on price too much?
Slightly less account management.
Yeah.
And so
like
we don't.
On that side, yeah.
No, like on the stack, are you talking about technology-wise?
I like where you're going with this. Like how you manage their account is time and money as well.
Yeah.
That's where you can lessen the burden.
Yeah, exactly. And I think our team have been tossing this around. And I'll just talk quickly about the changes in our team. Our team, as I said before, we've got eight team members, plus we have 4 fractional people that we're working with now. And fractional is a whole other episode because it's just unlocked so much potential for us. So if we look at it, we have more senior people than we have junior people. And we have more people working on strategy than we have on tickets. The technology stack, we have pretty much a standard stack across all of our clients. We have to, because you have to have. And also, our clients always own their own subscriptions. And I think that this is a big difference between myself and some of the other people out there in the market, right? So we don't resell and anchor any revenue that we book against subscription services that we resell. So that means that the client has their credit card in Microsoft, in Google, in Dropbox, or where if we have to resell annually, yep, okay, we'll do it. But they're not tied to us for anything. And nothing that we push into their environment is anchored to us apart from the IP that goes inside the MDM. So patching engines, user experience, restart processes, DEP, how it look and feel at the start. That is all IP that we own, and that is IP we rip out straight away, right, when we don't work with a client. But they don't end up with an insecure Jamf environment because all the security and things like that stay there. So with that as my caveat, all that happens is if we have conversations and people don't want to pay more, they just decline some of the features that are helpful for us, but nicer to have. Defender, for example, we use Defender on device, and Defender level 1 works adequately. Defender level 2 is better, because particularly when you start looking at things like cloud apps and whatever. So if a client doesn't care about governance, I don't care necessarily about what applications that they use, because if it's a real threat, DNS will stop it. If it's a phishing threat, hopefully the DNS will stop it, or the phishing filter or the mail filter will stop it. But when it comes to, do you need to log every cloud service and how many processes or hours or loads or anything, they don't care. So we just go, okay, we can save you money there because their budget's only so big. And that means that we're not spending time looking at logs and then going through and being investigative over there. So if they want to get the strategic piece, we just uplift it by $4, get purview, and then we care about CM. And that's where it starts to change. That makes sense?
It does. It's just I'm a little bit amused because I'm dealing with the whole purview and defender thing like earlier today even. So it's funny that you're mentioning that timely right now. But yeah, it does.
I will say this. I've made more money off Microsoft in my Apple career than any other thing. Because Microsoft is a necessary evil because it is the backbone of all industry on the internet, or anyone that connects to the internet has used a Microsoft product. I don't know. I think 90% of our clients have Entra as the way in to their environments, even if they're fully Mac and fully Google. We have most people on Exchange. The biggest selling point for Exchange, Microsoft 365 for email, is the fact that shared mailboxes are free.
Yes.
And that is the actual selling point. And I'm just like, for all the other reasons, cool. I don't want to pay for too many more mailboxes when my staff leave. Okay, we'll stay with Microsoft over here. But also Microsoft is actually really come along in the last number of years for Mac. I think that there's been a couple of people who have been in that team at Microsoft who have been really Apple focused, and I hope that continues. But really, if we can't do it in Microsoft first, we interrogate whether we can. And then after that, then we will look elsewhere. And I think, again, aligning our policy to do that way helps a lot because it, like, our team know what it can do. We can train on one platform. We can understand what's going on. We can install multi-tenant management through things like SIP. And so we've got this efficiency there. As soon as you step change out and you start using MSP-focused tooling, it's the Wild West. And I'm going to soapbox for a bit. At the end of the day, when you make a decision to use a tool in your business, you need to have an assessment of a few things. So we go through a vendor risk assessment every time we look at a client's choices on what they use in the business. But we also do the same thing. I have followed some really, like how can I say this, garage level products and decided to put them into my clients' environments. I'm not saying that is irresponsible, and I'm not saying the people who built and founded those products are bad people. I was just a consultant backing in a consultant who was similar to me that built a tool that solved their problem, not thinking about the impact of what would happen. And that means that they are, I don't know whether they've got the resourcing behind it. I don't know if they've got the skills behind it. I don't know if they've got like what their business model is, what their plans are, what's their exit, what do they want to do? Where are they going to put this over the course of the next 15 years? And I think that we've all been on the journey, and I really do want to call out that this is not about people shouldn't do this. It's that you have to pick your vendor really carefully because your vendor can screw you really hard, not because the person's bad, just because there's a certain point where the person loses control of the relationship with you, and then you're dealing with megacorp. Yeah. So what I do is I say, I will take the risk with a starting up an emerging product, but I will always have a contingency. I'll always go, okay, what's the product that's I don't know if you have it in your supermarkets. We call it like white label or home brand. You got your the brand, and you got your generic. What you want to do, ideally, is go, the branded product does all of these things and costs this much. The white label product does 90% of it, and the 10% that it may not do is probably just like the marketing, or it could be something like that. The engine is the same. Yeah. You shouldn't be just discounting down and putting it in at the price of the generic. You should be saying, okay, I need to be at like 75% of the branded product. The reason why is that white label product that you're using may disappear.
Yeah.
and you may have to pay for the branded version because there's no other choice. And so all of a sudden, if you have to make that shift and you've been charging 25% of the branded product, that lift is big.
Yeah.
But the 25%, if you go to 75% price, your lift is 25%, and you can have that conversation more easily. So with Microsoft is very transactional. It's very much you put your credit card in, or we can resell it to you. But their pricing model is very clear.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about that. So when we go to RMM, or let's look at Defender as an example, right? So EDR. If you choose an MSP-based EDR, I guarantee you within 3 years' time, it will be sold at least once.
Yeah.
If you choose a cloud backup platform, I guarantee you it will be sold at least once in 3 to 5 years. And then you have these awkward conversations like Dropsuite got sold to Ninja, right? So then you've got a new rep, and then it's what's happening. And it even happens at Dropbox level, right? Which is, I've had a conversation recently with Dropbox where they actually said, hey, this client is actually unprofitable. Now, that's a really strange thing for an account manager to say. But what they did is 3 or 4 years ago is they offered pricing to give you enterprise features for not enterprise price. We loaded it up because enterprise is unlimited storage. And now we've got so much stuff in there, and the team is too small for the number of licenses to get like the break-even point to work. They're saying, oh, you're not profitable. We're having to increase the price.
Yeah.
Or you can go to a lower tier product, which is not enterprise, and lose features. And that is a strange conversation to have with a vendor at that level. And then my client's going to be like, you told us this would be the answer. And so even at Dropbox, we question whether Dropbox is the right place, because Google would never do that. Google don't care. Google's a numbers game. Microsoft's a numbers game, right? So what I'm trying to get to is understanding the motives of the vendor, which are commercial, are very different, understanding the problem that you're trying to solve with the tool that you choose. So Microsoft, very bullish because it is working better than ever. The pricing is transparent. And if it goes wrong in Microsoft, someone will fix it. If it goes wrong, at wherever that's smaller, you're relying on a small team of developers.
Even Rackspace, a couple of years ago, they had a major security issue, and people lost access to email, lost data, or potentially lost data at least for a period of time. And relying on Rackspace to fix that was much less certain than, to your point, trusting in Microsoft to just have everybody back online as quickly as possible because they can't suffer the brand damage from that.
Yeah, so going deeper into that, your team trains on one platform. It's an ecosystem that is really, it's actually a lot of products that are really like jankily put together in some ways, but at least you can get certifications for it and training pathways for it. And so the more you do, the stronger you get. But when you're doing, some companies will need Microsoft at that level where you've got Purview and Defender and all these conditional access policies. Some clients don't need it and they live in Google. Now, are we securing Google and Microsoft tenancies to the same level? Is there a mechanism for us to do that? Okay, I don't know. I have to train 2 people or 1 person twice to get that knowledge to make sure that we're doing it right for both. And so that's why Microsoft is effectively my North Star when it comes to first things first, is can we do it in Microsoft? And I feel like there's probably a lot of people out there that may have a like totally different take on it. But at the end of the day, they have got that dominance, and I want a business that's simple, and that simplicity comes from like the products that we choose being reliable and easy to support.
Yeah, I would agree. The other piece that I found interesting is I think you even said that your Google, like your clients that use Google, you also front that with Microsoft Entra SSO. So basically, even your Google clients are going through Microsoft, at least for the authentication piece.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. So I'm very simplistic, but Google is easier to manage with Microsoft than it is to manage with Google. And so if you look at this from two perspectives, there's securing the environment where you've got all of your conditions and sharing and all those kinds of data management considerations. One thing. But when it comes to administration, we spend more time making sure that Everything is orchestrated behind Entra for Dropbox, for shared drives in Google, for provisioning applications, then we're living in that space. And for the clients, what we make sure that we do is that we teach them straight away the value of this. And the value of this is that we can provide shared administrative load for user access control with Microsoft through the functionality of My Groups. So we can create groups in Microsoft Entra that have leadership people in the business as owners of those groups, who then can add and remove people from those groups. And all of a sudden, they have agency to add people in and remove people from shared drives for clients, shared drives for finance, be that in Dropbox, be that in Microsoft or in OneDrive and SharePoint, or be that in Google Drive. And again, I'm the laziest person on the planet. I don't want to actually answer the ticket to give Julie in finance access to the leadership drive. We just teach the team how to actually do that themselves. That's my efficiency gain that we've done a lot of work on over the last couple of years.
It's pretty interesting to rely on Microsoft so heavily, even for the authentication part, when a client insists on using Google Workspace. We support a handful of clients using Google Workspace, but it's mostly Microsoft 365 for all the reasons you mentioned. Even though I've been known to complain about them moving features and renaming them, I think they've settled down in the last year, but there was a period of about 2 years where even if you referred to Microsoft's own documentation, it would refer to the old name. So then you're just hunting for what did they rename this to and where did they put it? So aside from all of that, which is just kind of table stakes, at least you're focused on one platform, Microsoft's own portal for managing all of this stuff. And you get a huge efficiency from that focus on one platform versus supporting whatever they happen to have. And that goes for your network stack and everything else that you mentioned earlier as well.
And look, I can bring everything back to policy. Because I just honestly, every time I make a decision, I'm like, okay, what's the policy that helps me inform that? Good example is we went through an audit recently with an external audit company, and the company was doing ISO 27001. I'm going to just talk about this quickly because I think Americans miss what ISO 27001 actually is. So 27001 is an international standard for information security management. So an ISMS is a security management system. And what you're looking to do in an ISMS is have a whole list of strategies and decisions around the data that the business actually has, be that physical data, be that electronic data, and then going through the process of ISO 27001, what you do is you create a statement of applicability. So a statement of applicability says, these are the types of data and the components of this framework that apply to your business. What we offer is a lightweight version of that. We just have to do it. So we need to know what the scope of the business is. You do this in your discovery phase and your onboarding of your client. You usually find out where all the data is, how it's being backed up, all those questions, right? But with ISMS, you say, okay, cool, there is a data discovery, and then all the data needs to be classified. The classifications are based on the legislation and the people who are stakeholders, right? So in Australia, taxation, you have to keep your documents for 7 years. For personal information, you can't retain it for more than 2, which means that if you've got a person who's applied for a job, you have to have a privacy policy about how you dispose of that application after a period of time. So you have to go, instead of it being keep it for 5 or 7 years, you have to get rid of it before 2.
Okay.
If we don't have that classification, we don't know how to create the rules around the data and how to segment it properly so we can keep those things going. But then it comes to policies that are more network focused. So, how are you securing your network? How are you securing your devices? What is your multi-factor? What is your strength of passwords and all these kinds of things? And the anecdote that I've got is that we went through the process of doing a certification with an auditor, and they had a consultant come in and help them build their policy. The policy is, we shouldn't be in this conversation while we didn't actually align their login experience to their policy. We just did our standard. And I read through this document in the audit. They said, okay, show us how the complexity of passwords for Microsoft meet this policy that's been written. Now, this is a policy someone's just dreamt up. Length of characters, this, that, and the other. Impossible to decipher. But then when we went back into Microsoft, it's actually impossible to provide a password of that level of complexity. Right. And so what's fascinating here is that I asked the consultant, how do you certify against this? Because look here, you can't do it.
Yeah.
And I actually don't know. And so when we went back and went through that, we said, okay, what's really practical here? What's Microsoft's minimum standard?
Yeah.
And so instead of this being a conversation about dreaming up something that's complicated, we just say we meet Microsoft's minimum standard for password complexity plus multi-factor, and we just choose the options for multi-factor, be it passkey, push notification to Microsoft Authenticator or whatever else. So again, by anchoring it back in the Microsoft space, Microsoft will update the documentation. Microsoft will be the source of truth, and we don't have to update policies all the time. So once we've got all that stuff in the ISMS sorted out, it's really easy for us to continue to go, okay, is there a policy? No, let's build a little bit of policy and add it in. And is there a gap that we have to exempt this thing because it doesn't do what it needs to do? Because people come to you about encryption, and all of a sudden they're developers. And it's, yeah, you're not really, this is not what we're about here. We shouldn't be doing development work. Then you've got a hard no or a conversation to have.
Interesting. If we're all game for a part 2 here, we will shift gears and focus on a couple of maybe case studies as we delve into. I know Jerry's been down the SOC 2 compliance road recently, doing a little bit of a deeper dive, and especially in terms of how Adigy helps us implement these compliance features. Sam, you just said you've been delving into some of this stuff as well. And Michael, I know you're a wealth of information about all sorts of things. Yeah, if you guys are game, we'll continue on with the rest of this conversation in part 2 with Michael Thomsen of Origin 84.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of Apple